the question about the slow rate of registration, that is real, but when you say the graduates are the majority of IEK members, that's not true, because I shared the figures recently, and I pledged that we are trying with time to make the corporate be the majority, so that when people join the graduate class, we are able to match them up quickly for mentorship purposes. So let me just finish. The problem that is there, and the reason why the issue of the slot of I don't know. Look, can I skip the question so that I finish the issue of graduate voting and everything?
Yes, you can just skip to the relevant question.
Exactly. So
that you can address.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
reason why we are worried, and I was discussing with Joseph and Ansari earlier. You know, when we say graduate, it's not the people who have left school last year. These are people who have been there. Some of them have been working for 10 years. Some of them is Joseph Kitilit a few months ago. You know, those are the people who have been saying, can we be allowed to vote? And that, as I said earlier, those were one of the problems we created ourselves by refusing to put transparent systems. You know, IEK started in 1972. There was only one university, the University of Nairobi. So it was serving one university. The professor at the Department of Engineering then became the chairman of IEK, and most of the officials were from the university, from the ministry. We failed to rise up to the occasion when the universities became more. And therefore, we've not been able to process, to transition these people. So people graduate, the system is hard, like electrical engineering. When we were in IEK, we got a complaint from government that there is scarcity of electrical engineers. When the thing, IBK started and saying, you cannot be promoted in Kenya Power unless you are a PE to certain positions. Then there was a crisis. So we needed to bring, that is what informed the issue that this is going to be a crisis unless we address it. And IBK is a regulatory body. IEK came up with a very innovative system. Let us expand the panels. Before, in electrical engineering, there were 3 panelists. And the rule is that 3 have to meet. So if any of them was not around, and one of them was a former chairman who was traveling a lot. So when any of them was not around, the panel could not meet. They used to meet twice a year. When I became honorary secretary in 2016, I had to write that chairman of the panel messages and say, we have this number of applications at the secretariat. Can you let me know when you are going to sit? And I had to report at the council meeting that I have written to this chairman, and we have asked him to convene the panel review of these projects. So when we increase the panelists, that should become a bit shorter. But EBK, I'd like to announce now that I'm rushing back to Nairobi tomorrow morning, because 3 p.m., the IEK Council is having a meeting with EBK board. And if you send me a message now, whatever problems you have with EBK, secretary@iekenya.org. In the morning when I reach Nairobi, I will download all of them, forward them to the secretariat, and it will be part of the discussion. EBK has regulations, and because of those regulations and it being because of those regulations and it being a government agency, sometimes they say yes, like the way the chairman was saying yesterday, but they are not able to implement immediately. So those people, we have 3 categories of graduates. Those, some of them have 10 years experience. We're going to discuss and say, what is the rule of 3 years before you become EBK graduate? Then you have to wait 3 years before you can become PE. That is, you know, you can't understand that. And we have 7 engineers sitting on EBK board who are talking our language. So we want to come with an innovative way of removing that thing. Because once you pass, you know, there are geniuses in the world. How will you stop him getting registered? Because he has passed the interview. How does a 3-year, after he has passed the interview, change anything? Because what else is he going to do? He's already IEK corporate member. I've already given him a letter. I've already given him a certificate. So you are waiting for him to 3 years now to do what with him? You're not going to interview him again. So we want, and I've promised in my manifesto, that one of the things I am going to try to harmonize the interview panels at EBK and IEK, so that whatever IEK is doing, it becomes automatic with EBK. So we don't have to waste time with our members. So we hope with that, we shall shorten the registration period. There were some members who were actually graduates before 2011. What do we do with these people? We have to process them immediately. You can't start telling them, go to EBK, wait for 3 years, and then come to IEK. IEK cannot process. We've actually boldly, and I personally have had discussions with the registrar. And I told him, IEK rules are different from EBK, and we have processed people without due regard to that 3-year rule. Once there was a court ruling, and someone has been practicing for 3 years and is able to pass the interview, those fellows, I'll say without fear of contradiction, that I have signed their certificates. So we are way ahead from what EBK. And whatever challenges we are having, we are going to have a meeting. Forward those challenges to me, I'll ensure that I table them tomorrow. So how to deal with EBK? That's one of the ways. How will graduate engineers value for money for the 4,000 they are paid? Those of you who are the 50th anniversary celebration of EBK, I raised these questions. I was given a chance. I was a panelist at the governance session. And I said, governance means you explain to the people you are governing how they should be governed, and you agree with them. So if the majority of people feel that the 4,000 is expensive, the regulator should look at it, and we should revisit it and come up with what is manageable. But if you see, and if you are able to elect progressive council for IEK, these 4,000 shillings should not be a lot of money, because some people also expect a lot of service, because we know when you reduce EBK license 4,000, we in IEK cannot increase our subs, because, you know, it will be like, why is IEK asking us to pay 10,000 and EBK is still 4? So for us to have delivery of services, what is saying, we need to improve the welfare of engineers across students, graduates, consultants, so that we have money. We have money in their pockets, so that the 4,000 is not a hindrance. If we realize that we have to pay this money to progress, I'm sure someone is paying for these bills today, you know. You can't say it's expensive to have this debate, so let us not have it. It's a big disservice you are doing to our profession. So let us put money together to pay for this service, explain ourselves to our people, and get the right leaders in the place. Legislation in county level. We're not forgetting about it. I know Howard is able to say he's had negotiations preparing to be president. We've already had, and we've been invited to the county of governors meetings. It's only that it's a long process to get something done, because that's why in IEK, one of the things that we are going to do, and we agreed in the Mombasa during the conference, is that we are going to have thematic panels. I know we are loaded with a lot of things happening now. The earliest opportunity I get, I'm going to advertise for expression of interest, for people to express interest in serving in various thematic panels. And we shall have people on that panel, corporates, graduates, so that when something like this in the county is happening, we're able to mobilize people, machinani, so that they run with it and tell us, hey, this legislation is coming up, and this is the way we need to strategize.
Please, in the interest of time, could we just skim through so that just conclude, so that we also give ample time to our candidate, Engineer Howard?
Yes, maybe the contentious issue of graduate engineers voting. You know, it is in our constitution. I said when we did the review of that constitution, the contentious things we needed to negotiate with the current people then was election. So the issue of voting was never addressed. But I would also like to put it down to you. As a Kenyan engineer, when you travel, you are held in high esteem because of the services you give. We are now struggling to join international accords. We have signed MRAs across the region, so that when you go out as a Kenyan, you need to be recognized as that. So the challenge will come when we don't have some people with the definition of engineer. If you look at I know we are saying graduate engineer. You can't say I'm an engineer and so and so. You can only say so and so after you have a PE. So we need to be uniform about things. And we know that it's not a question of a graduate engineer being allowed. These people, 10 years experience, should be allowed to vote. And we need to transition them quickly. So that is my take, that it is possible through a constitutional review to give rights to this group of people. But it might not be necessary, because if we do the speed at which we are doing and bring all of them on board, then there will be no clamor that I'm not voting. All of us will be voting because you'll want to transition so that you have an additional benefit of voting and making a decision to elect your leader. Thank you.
Please, thank you. Let's give him a round of applause. Would now like to proceed to our candidate, Engineer Howard, who is able to answer the questions from the audience.
Thank you, Luke. The first question was, why is registration slow? My take is that there are many reasons, because registration is a process. Some of the reasons are associated with the candidates. Some of the reasons are associated with the bureaucracies. Those reasons associated with the candidates are also various. Some people just fear to be examined. Others have not had a chance to be trained properly. Others have actually been trained and they are 70% good, but they are still waiting to be 100% good. You keep on wondering you see, there is a panel to examine you. It's not your job to examine yourself and decide I'm not at 100%. Document your work, take it to that panel. If they tell you are still 40%, they'll advise you where you are weak, and you can go and correct it in another 6 months and show up back. Because I think the panels are fair enough to tell you what you're supposed to panel beat. Those are problems associated with the candidates. There are also problems associated with bureaucracies. I've seen Engineer Matalanga, one of these fine days, being roasted on Telegram. Someone asking him, why have you not released my certificate 2 months down the line? And he defended himself by saying the certificate is being printed at De La Rue. These are bureaucracies that can be solved by digitization. You know, I'm a member of PMI US, and I'm PMP certified for the last 10 years. Those who are calculating my age. Our PMI certificate, when I'm renewing it, right now I'm in the 12th year cycle, I think, of renewal. When I'm renewing it, I only need to update my CPDs and pay my subscriptions. Within 2 minutes, I receive my certificate. It's that efficient. This is a question of bureaucracies, which can shorten the time for registration. Of course, there are other issues that Engineer Matalanga has really exposed on. I don't want to add on it. Issues like, you know, the panel chairman disappearing in the thin air, there is no alternative panel, and blah, 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 blah. All those could also be contributing to lengthen time for registration. But for sure, I worked for 6 years as a quality assurance engineer and managing issues of quality in projects. One thing I learned is that you cannot solve a problem if you cannot define it. This issue of prolonged time of registration, we need to identify it and separate 1, 2, 3 from each other so that we are able to know what we are addressing at what point and how we are addressing it. Graduates voting. Graduates cannot vote in these elections. This is what our constitution says. There should be no two ways of answering that question. However, I would also say that personally, I am a very liberal person, and I believe in thinking and looking at things from many different dimensions. The person, when Engineer Matalanga was championing the Constitution 2015, I was the person in that SGM who moved the motion to allow graduates to vote. If we check the minutes, it should be on the minutes. I remained on the floor arguing alone until Chairman Kosgei told me, Howard, you've said enough, now you need to sit down. But this is how I look at it. It has nothing to do with how many years somebody has spent outside university. I've had this argument that, you know, if you're a graduate, if you're not given rights to vote, you'll be motivated to be corporate member. The motivation to become corporate member has got nothing to do with voting. Voting rights are basic rights. You see, you cannot tell your son that, young man, you cannot buy a coat and put it on now until you become married, so that you can put on a coat, because a coat is just a basic clothing, which has absolutely nothing to do with motivation to get married. Those are two mutually exclusive things. What motivates people to progress to PE? People are looking for promotions, people are looking for better salaries, people are looking for independence in professional practice. Those are things that motivate people to progress from GE to PE, not voting rights. However, I am trained in matters of law. There are fears and look at the way it is. Thank you. Sometimes, hello, okay. Sometimes, I've engaged them so viciously, and I've engaged graduate engineers, and I know that sometimes they can be extremely unreasonable. Sometimes graduates can be extremely unreasonable, creating too much fears among the seniors. For example, can you imagine if graduates are allowed to vote, and then we come into a meeting? If I have so many instructions, I don't know which one to follow. then we have to still find a formula of regulating. For example, we can go the direction of self-regulation. In this kind of methods, you have the opportunity perhaps to fuse EPK and IEK. After all, they've been working on the same thing anyway. Fuse them and create another entity that will do self-regulation for engineers, so that if you think the person the CS usually chooses treats you badly, you can choose your own person through a vote. Because all these things can be legislated, and that's why we have to be liberal in our thinking. We don't have to look like we are fighting because we are one unit. We are the engineers of Kenya, and there are no other engineers. The engineers of Kenya are the ones sitting here.
Thank you very much.
Had I finished the question? Yes.
You have answered the ones you felt like answering.
Thank you. Can I add something? Oh, there is one question. He said, how can EPK be vibrant like IEK? Thank you. Okay. Thank you. So there was a final question that was asking, how can we make EBK vibrant like EBK? I just wanted to remind us again that EBK is a regulator. And for those of us who are younger than me, I've lived for a short life to see transformation at EBK. It was more moribund than you see it today. And EBK tells a very interesting story of what I stand for today, you know. Freshness, injecting freshness, new energy, new vibrancy. EBK plucked somebody to become the CEO who had never been an employee of EBK. IK also did that, and they have been very successful. They plucked somebody from somewhere, brought her to be the CEO, and she has done tremendous work. And I've been telling voters to pluck Howard from where he is, make him their president, just to introduce a new dynamism. Because you see, the constitution, which was championed by Engineer Matalanga, did something very interesting in 2015. It concentrated on revising Section 9. Section 9 always used to ensure that leadership of IK is hereditary. So-and-so will inherit from so-and-so, so-and-so will inherit from. So in 20 years, we know who's going to be president. That constitution changed Section 9 and opened it to open candidature and universal suffrage. If Howard is fit to be president, he does not need to have sat in the council to serve in the council. He only needs to put his credentials on the table, put his candidature there, pitch for his position, and be voted. That constitution caused a lot of problems. In 2016, when Auma tried to vie and Engineer Matalanga, they were rigged out. In 2018, because Auma had introduced electronic voting and we supported him and it went through, the formula changed. They blocked candidates from vying. If they don't like you, you are blocked. In Kamau was also a victim of that. In 2020, we are happy to have an election like now, because the mood between candidates, the mood of the election handlers is really, really good. The mood of the council, the mood of the institution is just perfect for this election. We have progressed, that's for sure. We are going into a transition. We have to lead this transition and lead it seamlessly.
It will be unfair for me not to clarify that our council period was 2018 until now 2020. The participation for the engineers' fees must have happened under the previous council. And this is the council with the people who had taken us behind. Basically, it was a team that was rigged in. So we cannot expect anything from people who are not the authority. Just these things must have happened. That's why we're saying now, if there are mistakes made, let us admit it and correct. So I just, as Honorary Secretary 2018. consulting engineers. Thank you.
I'll try to repeat it quickly. I might not repeat the exact same words. But number one, I said graduates cannot vote in this election. It's as simple as that because the Constitution limits them from voting. And historically, if there's anything that I've been in IEK is I've tried to walk the narrow path of the Constitution. Anybody who does anything in IK, I usually try to challenge them, but only based on the Constitution, including where the Constitution itself conflicts it. The Constitution conflicts itself. Secondly, I had mentioned that having said that graduates cannot vote now, I am on record as having when that Constitution 2015 was being championed in the SGM that adopted it, I moved a motion on that day for graduate engineers to be allowed to vote. I argued the case. I remained on the floor alone. The chairman told me, Howard, you have spoken enough. Now you must sit down. My understanding is that voting is a basic right. And the argument that GE voting is supposed to motivate GEs to transition, I think it's unsubstantiated and it's unsupported for a simple reason that we know, you know, I know that what motivates people to transition from GE to PE, people are looking for better salaries, better remuneration. People are looking for rising up in the ranks. People are looking for professional independence. Those are the key issues that motivate people to transition, not voting. Not voting, because we know there are even those who transition and they still don't vote. So obviously voting can never ever be a motivation for people to transition. And I likened it to a parent who tells the child that, you know, you cannot put on a coat until you marry. And he tries to say, you see, I'm motivating you to marry so that you can put on a coat. Those two things are mutually exclusive and they should never be associated. If you have the money to buy the coat and look good. Something else that I wish to say, in the current constitutional review, the one that was chaired again by Senior Engineer Matalanga and Secretary Engineer Uma, I know it has been said that they received comments from 3 or 4 people. 3 people. I'm guilty because I sent my comments slightly later, belatedly. But if you look at what my comments were, is that my understanding, you need to be dynamic, that there are genuine fears among the elders that graduate engineers or younger engineers can abuse powers to vote. And those concerns are genuine, especially if you look and listen to how some graduate engineers reason. I've engaged them, and they know I've engaged them. This one, we can bet on it. Some of their reasoning sometimes looks very dangerous. But this is what I have to say about that dangerous reasoning. That as a professional and whose profession leans toward legislation and laws, I've studied a Master of Law in construction law. And I have a slight understanding of how legislation happens. When you have fears about abuse of rights, you do not throw the rights out of the window. You legislate those abuses. You become dynamic in your thinking. You can, for example, in universities, there are always 2 students who are members of the Senate. And there are clear rules that have, in the statutes, that have defined how they should behave in the Senate. Because they are representing a big constituency of students, and they can speak for those students inside the Senate, so that Senate makes decisions that are informed. Nothing, to me, nothing stops graduates from voting, nothing stops graduates from being in council. They have proved to be very resourceful. Today we are here courtesy of a lot of work that has been put in this thing by graduates. So they are resourceful, and they are our people. They are part of this body. We can legislate. My proposal, the one that I had sent belatedly, was actually giving a few models that can be looked at. For example, you can allow graduates to be able to have powers to vote on representation but curtail their powers to vote on constitutional changes, so that they don't come and vote a constitution that says for you to become a PE, you have to do nothing and just become. You know, we have to protect the constitution. We can legislate that. We can legislate and say we will have, for example, a graduates chapter, and the chair and the honorary secretary of the graduates chapter will be sitting on the council. We can legislate and say, even under our current constitution, we can say we have two co-opted members who are supposed to help us to get representation from non-represented groups. Graduates form a constituency of almost 11,000 people who are subscription, who can pay subscription to the institution. They come, they have two people co-opted, a lady and a man. These are all ways that we can create different models to deal with these issues that has remained a big monster. People are wondering, so what are we doing here if we are just waiting for the day to become PEs? Because we have to recognize that these are adults, they're educated, they're sharp, they passed many exams, and they have powers to vote the President of the Republic of Kenya.